Hello, everyone. This is Greg, your host of Goddamn Gamecube, and this is Season 4. Follow Goddamn Gamecube on social for updates on the show, and subscribe to us on YouTube for bonus video content. Thank you, and enjoy today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Goddamn Gamecube. Greg and Nick the Intern are leading the way here, and today we are talking about Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. When this game came out in 2015 for consoles, it was definitely my game of the year, or my dark horse for game of the year. This game is awesome. So Nick, why don't you take it away and let's do this.
All right. Thanks, Greg. I am pretty excited to talk about these two games.
Yep.
These were pretty important games, especially the first one to us way back in 2015. I may have mentioned this in another episode. 2015, we ate very well with Bloodborne and this game coming out in the same year. And it's a tough choice between which one I would say is better.
Yeah, for real.
So quick intro here to Divinity Original Sin. Oh, oddly enough, Divinity Original Sin is actually the 6th game in the Divinity franchise. Chronologically, it's the 2nd.
That's strange.
It's very odd. And it was really Larian's first game that was actually a commercial success.
Yep.
And you do not have to play any other of Larian's games to understand what's going on. However, before we get into Divinity Original Sin, we are going to get into one game in particular that got both Greg and I into Larian Studios, the developer of this game and every other game in this Divinity franchise. And that game is called Divinity 2 Ego Draconis, or you may know it now as the Dragon Knight Saga. Greg, why don't you take this?
Yeah, so Divinity 2 Ego Draconis, this came out in like 2009 or something, mid-high school, late high school for you. And as far as I remember, we had sort of played all the major RPGs, Elder Scrolls, everything available on Xbox. And I had found this game either online or on like an eBay listing or something. And so I was just out of stuff to play, so I chose to give it a shot. And yeah, it's kind of an uneven experience, but I really enjoyed playing it, you know, for what it is. And it was my first introduction to Larian. This was at the same time as those other shitty RPGs like Risen and other stuff that we played, but I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, I think you've pretty much hit the nail on the head there. And honestly, if you've played Divinity Original Sin 1 or 2 and you want to check out Larian's other games, I think Ego Draconis is a pretty solid experience, if not a little janky. There's some fun stuff, and the quirky Larian Studios things you might expect are in that game also. The one thing I'll add to that, it came as no surprise. Ego Draconis was a commercial failure.
Yeah, no shit.
And it put Larian Studios into debt.
Oh, wow.
Yep. All right, so let's move on to Divinity Original Sin 1.
This game rules.
This game rules. So, as we said, this is developed by Larian Studios, who is a developer we've grown to love very much on this show, mostly in part to this game and its sequel. So funnily, this game was developed almost concurrently with another game called Dragon Commander. You've probably never heard of it.
Nope.
No, they decided during development that they wanted to put most, if not all, their resources into Original Sin and not Dragon Commander, which I think they made the right decision there. This game has a very interesting history. It was released in 2014 on PC only, and then it was released in 2015 called the Enhanced Edition. That was when it was on consoles, the Xbox, PlayStation, and then it got the update on Windows. I don't believe you can actually play the original anymore. It just totally replaced it.
And we should mention, this game started as a very successful Kickstarter project. It was huge.
Yes, that is correct. That's right. I should have led with that. It was a Kickstarter game, and it raised nearly $1 million US, and their goal was only $400K.
I remember this was not the first Kickstarter game project, but one of the biggest ones of all time.
I think you're right, because this was a long time ago. 2013 is when it hit its goal. It had to have been one of the biggest, at least, video game Kickstarters.
A little offshoot for a second. I remember in music school, we talked about Kickstarter a lot for bands kickstarting albums and stuff like that. But when this Divinity Original Sin project Kickstarter got so big, it didn't make me more aware of Kickstarter. It just made me realize how big these projects can get. Like, this game making $1 million was a huge deal at the time, for sure.
Right. I thought Kickstarters were more for like little projects and not, creating an entire video game.
Yeah, $1 million plus.
Yeah, it made $1 million. Good for them. So what I found really interesting is, they re-released this in 2015 and it got all the updates. You can no longer play the original. Not dissimilar to how Zaum handled Disco Elysium Final Cut. I'm wondering if they got kind of the idea from there. And maybe other developers do the same thing. I can't say I mind it. I think it's pretty cool. They release one version for PC, then they release an update that goes everywhere. Now, I don't believe there's any merit in playing the original as far as what I've seen. Oh, no, we didn't play the original because we didn't play it on PC.
We played the console port.
So we have no experience with the original, but I'm pretty sure there is no reason why you would ever go back to the original. But if anyone listening has played it, I would love to hear how it played and your impressions of it compared to the Enhanced Edition.
How it was balanced and so on.
Yeah, very interesting to hear that. All right, so getting onto the basic premise of the game, you play as two people who are known as Source Hunters, and they are both custom characters that you create. Their generic names are Scarlet and Roderick, but they are totally yours to create and control. They are not original characters to this game. And you create them right before starting. You give them all their skills and however you want them to look like and everything like that. So you are brought ashore of this place called Sicil, and you embark on a murder investigation and pulled into a ploy that could rend the very fabric of time. And yes, that is just as wild as it sounds. So, Greg, my question for you is: you bought this, as we say on most of the shows we do together. You bought this originally. I never even heard of it. When you said, "Hey, Nick, there's a game coming out that's tactical RPG that's co-op," I said, "Yeah, let's do it." How did you find out about it?
So when I saw all the news about the big Kickstarter, it definitely piqued my interest, and obviously I remembered back to Ego Draconis and liking it. And you know, we're always killing for that co-op couch experience, especially an RPG that we can play together. There aren't very many of them. And so when I saw that there was going to be a co-op TAC RPG that's in a D&D based style, I'm like, dude, like, let's get after it. Like, let's go. Like, whenever the console port drops, let's go. I'm in.
I'm in. Yeah, let's go.
And we bought this pretty soon on release after it launched.
We did. Yeah. And that's a great segue into, now we're going to talk mechanics. That was the mechanic that really brought us into this game. It is co-op, and I will say to listeners here who have not played this, I do think this game is infinitely better in co-op than not.
Yes, it is.
It's a little cumbersome to play if you're just one person trying to control two custom characters. It gets a little funky at times.
And yeah, and what I found surprising is some of our friends actually don't like this game.
Yeah.
I don't know many games that are worse single player, maybe Rayman Legends.
But yeah, I think the co-op is the infinitely better experience if you can find someone to co-op this game with. All right, so before we get into the combat, there is an incredible level of character customization and detail you can do with this. A lot of stat and ability micromanaging, which that to us, that's like, let's go.
That's my shit.
That is our shit. So when starting the game, you can do your standard RPG fare. You choose your class. And they're all sort of variations on the classic fighter, wizard, rogue. Yep. There's some types that kind of combine the two sort of thing. And you can distribute your attribute points, which if you've played RPGs before, pretty standard stuff, strength, dexterity, all that. Two stats that they introduced here that I thought were really interesting that I haven't seen before are speed and perception. So the way combat works is you have something called AP, which this is going to sound a little weird. They look like little bubbles on your screen, and every movement, every action you take takes a certain amount of bubbles.
Yep.
Speed determines how fast you move outside of combat and improves your chance of getting a first turn and how many bubbles you get per turn. And perception determines your initiative and when you act in combat and your initial action points. So those are two stats that directly affect how you can move.
Now, we should say that this is a turn-based RPG, but every action you take does take these bubbles, whether it's swinging a weapon, using an item, moving around. It all acts on this sort of bubble meter, and if you don't use all your bubbles, they get carried over to the next turn, and it's a pretty cool, like...
You manage the bubble meter, and you do well in combat. As we've said on some of the other tactical game episodes that we've covered, the best stat is always movement and your ability to get around.
Nick, what's that famous quote you have about Fire Emblem? Need move.
You just need to be able to move. All right, so let's move on to the abilities. Now, it's again, it's your fairly standard stuff. You have things like your single-handed, two-handed, dual-wielding, and ranged attacks. And there's also a plethora of magical abilities. For example, Pyrotechnic covers fire, Hydrosophist covers water. What I really like about the elemental skills, and I guess all of them by extension, is the water Hydrosophist tree tends to have the healing magic, but especially early on, if you want to cure every status ailment available, you can't just pour everything into Hydrosophist.
Yep.
Different skills from different magic trees cure different status ailments. So it encourages you to branch out, which I think is pretty cool. So the real interesting part of all of these skills is how they work together. Greg, do you want to get into some of the combos you can do?
Sure. So I had never really seen this in a game before. So what jumped out to me right away is the way not only your different spells interact with each other, the different elements, but how your spells interact with the environment. Like you can cast spells that make it rain, then rain causes enemies to be wet, and then you can freeze those enemies, or you can shock them and stun them in place. Or if you can cause poison and then engulf that poison in flames. And I thought this was amazing. I've just never seen interactivity between elements, and friendly fire is on all the time. You can hit each other, your own party members.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, it's brutal and really funny.
Yeah, so like, for example, if you were to use the rain spell and create puddles everywhere, and then shoot a electric spell at the ground or at an enemy to try and shock them, it could create a shockwave across the ground where it's wet. And if your character is standing there, you will also get stunned.
Yep.
And it's pretty cool.
Friendly fire is always on.
Yes, that's a good point too. Friendly fire is on. You can blow each other up. You can get some pretty crazy things going on in combat. I always found it really cool how like you can, there's a combo that you can do that almost takes every single element into account. You can use earth to throw oil on the ground, blow it up with fire, and then put it out with water, and then freeze the enemy, which is really cool.
It's really wild.
Yeah. So, the last thing I'll get to here in terms of skills is defensive abilities. It's important that we mention defensive abilities and crafting here, because these systems were heavily gutted in the sequel.
Yep.
So in this game, you have a lot more options available to you in terms of resisting status debuffs, whereas in 2, you don't have as many options. And with crafting, you can create a lot of new items, a lot of armor, whereas the second one, you don't really have that. In this game, it is worthwhile to invest in your defensive abilities. As what I'll get into now is status ailments and how important they are.
Yep.
What I really like about this game, and what a lot of RPGs don't do very well, is status ailments, especially in the player's hands. You know, if you've played a Final Fantasy game, typically poisoning someone or freezing someone is not really worth it. You'd rather just do outright damage and kill them. But in Divinity Original Sin, it is so important, especially early on, to master status debuffs and effects, especially if you're playing on either classic or tactician difficulty. So for example, like freezing in the beginning of the game is incredibly powerful because it's very easy to do. And you can incapacitate enemies for several turns.
Stopping enemies from taking turns is a huge part of combat.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just whack away.
No. If you were to go into this game and try to just brute force your way through these encounters,
You can't do it.
Maybe on easiest possible difficulty you could, but if you're playing with any semblance of difficulty in mind, it's not going to work. You're going to need to knock people down, shock them, freeze them, especially early on if you're new, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and also your party is a maximum of 4 people. So if you're trying to take on enemies of like groups of 4, 8, 10, 12, you have to be able to manipulate the environment to win.
Yep. And there is a whole lot of different things you can do. Freezing, knocking down, shocking, mind control, setting people on fire. There's a lot of different ways to take out
There's a lot of
enemies.
crazy stuff.
And you can get some pretty crazy shit in battle. Like you can make poison clouds to poison all the enemies and then blow it up to get massive damage.
Yeah.
So the last thing I'll get into in terms of mechanics is I think they do difficulty really well in both of these games. So for both games kind of have the same difficulty options. There's and the main ones are classic and tactician, along with a hardcore mode if you're really into that. But the way they do it is, sure, enemies are a little tougher, they hit harder, and they have more health. But in tactician mode, especially versus something like classic, enemies are smarter and they'll throw more tricks at you. Like in classic mode, in one fight, there might be totally standard, nothing crazy will happen. But that same fight in tactician, maybe those enemies will start throwing bombs at you when ordinarily they wouldn't in other difficulty modes.
You mean status bombs, smoke, fire?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's pretty cool. I think that's a good way to do difficulty. It's not just bigger numbers, it's better AI, and the enemy is more equipped to deal with you.
Yeah, they're trickier.
Yeah, which I think is pretty cool. The last thing about building your character we're going to get into is something I've not really seen in an RPG. It's called talents. So during character creation and as you level up, you can get more points that go into your talent tree, which are very powerful, not even abilities, like passive effects that you can put on your character. And it's not like the passive effects you see in most RPGs. Not really. They have some very interesting effects, like some of them, you recover more HP when you eat food. You can cast better abilities with less AP use if you're standing on the elements of what you're casting. Like if you're on fire and standing on fire, your fire skills will take less AP to cast. You can get things that'll make you throw things, throw grenades and throw spells further distances too.
Yeah, I think Disco Elysium took a nod from this with the thoughts thing where, you get this passive upgrade where it has a positive and a negative. Where, you're really intelligent, but everyone in town hates you. Or it has this strange effect, like you can talk to animals or these other weird effects and things you wouldn't think of.
Yeah. And of course, there are really fun ones like Lone Wolf, which makes you incredibly powerful but unable to have any friends.
Lone Wolf mode is actually awesome. It's very different than the normal game. Like if you take on the Lone Wolf talent, instead of having a party of 4, it's only a party of 2. You can only have, for example, Nick and I cannot pick 2 other members with us. It's only us. But our stats are dramatically increased and we get other bonuses.
It's pretty cool the way they do it.
Yeah, it's almost like they turn the game completely on its head. Like this game is so customizable. If you love micromanaging stats, you'll be all over it.
Oh yeah, you will absolutely love this game if that's the case. So now that we're through the mechanics, let's talk about things like the presentation. So, I mean, I don't think this game looks especially great. I think it's fine. Although, I mean, it's a Kickstarter game, so I guess we can't talk too much about it.
Well, this game really has what you'd call the top-down Gothic style. It doesn't look too different than Diablo or Disco Elysium.
Yeah.
But I mean, Disco Elysium kind of does the watercolor thing. It's a little more artistic.
Yeah.
But this game doesn't look too dissimilar from hack and slash games. It's the best way I could describe it.
The last thing we'll get to is unfortunately a sad note. In terms of presentation and aesthetics, the composer who worked on all of Larian's games, up until Divinity Original Sin, has since passed away.
Yep.
He passed away in 2015.
His name is Kirill Pokrovsky.
He did see this game come out, and he did watch it win awards.
Okay, so he saw this game to completion?
He did. He did not see the enhanced edition come out in October of 2015. But he did see the game come out, and he did do the whole score for that soundtrack. So unfortunately, they did lose their composer after the creation of this game. But I do think some of the sounds are pretty fun. I still get them stuck in my head every now and again. I think they're pretty good. So now that that's through with the presentation, the aesthetics, we're gonna get into the story and the characters. There is a lot that happens in this game. We're going to try and get through it as best as we can. So, first, you enter the town of Sicil. That is the very first thing you do in the game. You get off the boat, and you get into the town called Sicil. There are orcs attacking, and they have an undead problem. That's essentially what's going on here. Your main objective is Counselor Jake has been murdered, and you need to figure out who did it, why they did it, and everything else revolving around the murder investigation, while also taking out undead and dealing with orcs.
So throughway problem.
So other than that quest, Sicil is pretty large and has a lot of major sections to it, whether in town or off to the west, the east sides, north, and whatever. They actually do a pretty good job at guiding you along without holding your hand. Like the NPCs suggest which ways to go. Now, that kind of leads into how the mechanics work. Like, If you go west, which is the intended way to go, everything is raining. And it sort of shows you the way, hey, freezing people is good. That is the way to do it.
And I wouldn't consider this to be like an open world game. It's more like you go to a big area, there's a bunch to do, then you move on to another area with stuff to do.
Pretty much.
And that's pretty much the structure.
Pretty much. So some notable characters that you meet are Arhu. He is a powerful wizard who can turn into a cat.
Meow.
And you also meet your few and far between companion characters here in Syciel. Midori, Bear Daughter, Medora, Bear Daughter, Jahan, and Wolfgraf. So, essentially, you go through Syciel, and you do the mysterious murder quest. Now, how do you feel about Syciel? I think it's a pretty good starting town, if not a bit generic.
What this game does a good job of is how each quest is unexpectedly linked to other ones, where you might think this is kind of a generic RPG town, but oh, this character actually knows about this quest, or if you dig up graves, there's a grave that leads to a cave, which leads to another area. So yeah, it might come off as a little bit generic, but there's so much to do, and it's so quirky and it's kind of funny, and the way that it's designed, there's always a new mystery for you to uncover. There's always something to see. So I think it's a good starting area. Sure, like you go to pub, accept quest, but yeah, it's kind of, sure, that's generic, but there's plenty of mystery here.
Would agree. Like on the surface, it's definitely like everybody's friendly to you. They want to help you out. It's the first RPG town, but there is a lot of really funny characters. Like the mayor is hard of hearing and his quests don't really go right because of it. The Legion guy just yells at you all the time. It's pretty funny stuff. So you go through the mysterious murder quest and eventually you meet Zombie Jake, who apparently, Zombie Jake is a recurring character in the Divinity series.
I don't remember him from Ego Draconis.
Yeah, I don't remember which games he's in specifically, but he is a recurring character throughout the franchise, which is pretty funny. So at the end of that quest, remember this name. You defeat the murderer and find out it's connected to the undead problem. It involves the ancient Source King known as Brachus Rex. Remember that name. Very important character, not only in Divinity Original Sin, but across the Divinity franchise. He's the first major boss of the game, and he's a powerful magic user, and he uses a lot of fire spells. And I actually remember this fight pretty well from when we first co-opted it. There's a lot of meteors falling everywhere. Do you remember how we did this? It's pretty funny.
Greg's suicide mission.
We sent you in there just by yourself, because he does one meteor attack, literally the first move. He kind of cheats with initiative. He always goes first and uses a meteor attack and wipes people out. So we sent you in there to just take it and die. And then the rest of the party went in just to take him out. Pretty funny stuff. Now, after you defeat Brachus Rex, you go to a place called the Homestead.
Yep.
So the Homestead kind of acts as your hub area. It's interesting that they give you a hub because no part of this game really gets locked off. Like you can go back to Syciel whenever you want, but they give you kind of a home hub called the Homestead. It's also called the End of Time. It's one of my favorite and least favorite areas of the game because I always also call this the lore dump area.
Yeah, that's accurate.
There's a imp called Zixzax, who's also a recurring character. He's an Ego Draconis as well. I like him because he speaks funny and he sounds funny. He has a lot to say, but my God, listening to him is horrendous. He goes on for like 15 minutes telling you about a whole bunch of space-time shit, and you're like, what?
Yeah, this is the part where you click X a bunch of times and just skip.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's cool and it's interesting, but I don't think they did a really good job here with explaining the plot.
Nope.
And it's like, in this kind of game, too, you kind of just want to run around and fight monsters, and they don't really give you enough incentive to care about this larger space-time continuum plot.
Not at all.
There's a whole bunch of different rooms you get to in the Homestead, like the Hall of Heroes, where you can recruit NPCs that aren't, like, characters like Medora or Jahan. You also get your item storage, crafting areas, buying secrets to find loot, whole bunch of fun stuff like that. It's actually a pretty expansive area, and it's incredibly important because as you find bloodstones, more rooms open up. And in order to beat the game, you need to find 12 blood/starstones to actually get through the last area of Homestead. So next, the next part of the game is the Lucala Forest, where you find the town of Silverglen, and you'll be given a new main quest to find the witch. This part of the game is really interesting because if you go here, you can go here early if you want. You can go here before doing the mysterious murder quest.
Really?
But Arhu comes up to you and says, wait a minute, you should probably solve the murder first.
That's funny.
Oh, man. But yeah, it's like, it doesn't really lock you off from Sicil. You can keep going back. I'm not especially married to this part of the game and Silver Glen. I think it's not super memorable, but Sicil definitely is. But the next part of the game, I think you'll remember very well because it was very funny for us. You go to the witch's cabin, which leads you to Hyberheim, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep.
Which is the elemental area where Ice King Boreas, however you pronounce that, has trapped the other elemental kings and everything is gold. Do you remember us going through this area when we were doing co-op? It's really funny. Everything is frozen and you have to and you walk around, just fall down everywhere.
Yeah. Is this the part where you have to put nails in your shoes?
Yep, that's right. That's right. It's amazing. So you go through this place and free the witch Ikara after killing King Boreas, which is a pretty cool fight. Do you remember this one?
This is the one where he has all the different elements.
So King Boreas is like an elemental fight. You think you're gonna fight an Ice King, but he actually changes between all different elements.
Yep, that's
which
right.
Which is pretty interesting. And unfortunately, it's the only boss I really have good memories of in this game, aside from Brachus Rex. So next comes to probably the worst part of the game, which is the northern section of the Luculla Forest and the Luculla Mines. I'm sure you remember this part.
Here we go.
Yeah. Honestly, this place kind of sucks, and I think it is the weakest part of an otherwise very good game.
This is the Death Knight part, right?
Yes, this is the Death Knight part. So you need to sneak around, which we didn't even mention the mechanics part. I think it's a pretty weak part of the game, sneaking. Especially in combat, you have to sneak around Death Knights because at your current part of the game, they are invincible, and you can't do anything. And if you get in combat with them, you have to run away, teleport out, do something. Otherwise, they'll just murder you.
It's incredibly irritating.
Fortunately, that sort of leaves once you get out of the mines. But then you have to go and fight the Immaculates, where you go to another really horrible place called the Luculla Desert. In this place, there's a bunch of winds, and your movement and your AP is permanently reduced while you're in the area. And it just makes fighting a total chore, which is really, really annoying.
I feel like I appreciate how the environment or even your spells can affect the puzzle solving, but sometimes it sort of devolves into this game being irritating or annoying. Even though I appreciate what they tried to do, even though in some areas it just doesn't work and is irritating.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So unfortunately, with the mines and then the desert, you kind of have back-to-back very weak areas of the game.
Yep.
And then you have to infiltrate the Immaculates, secret sect of people here. But it's really annoying because here's another part to this game that I don't think is especially strong, the puzzle solving.
Yeah, like I said before, I appreciate the interconnectivity between the spells, the environment, the combat, and how everything has a dual purpose, but it's just...
Yeah.
There are examples it doesn't tell you that you can move pots onto switches or how weight puzzles work. The puzzle solving in this game is too obtuse and it becomes very annoying.
Yeah, it's your characters might say, oh, something heavy might do something here, but it's just especially in this specific part too, it's the weight puzzle. You have to get the exact weights on the plates to make the doors open. I just thought that was incredibly irritating. I don't know about you, but I didn't like walking around with a stack of logs.
No, it's super irritating.
Incredibly irritating, unfortunately. But the good thing is, once you complete this part of the game and the Immaculate Temple, you finally get something that can kill Death Knights.
That's right.
And then you can either go back and kill them and get some revenge if you like, or when you now face them later in the game, you can actually do something, of which... Of course, the major Death Knight parts of the game are over, so it's a bit worthless to get it now.
Right, of course.
Not so super fan of that. But fortunately, the game kind of picks back up right after you do all this. And then you get to the next main quest, which is called Closing the Rift. Now, once you do it, it's pretty cool. Homestead will become permanently under attack once you finish this. Once you finish this quest, if you just kind of stand around, fireballs will just come flying at you from random thoughts. So
Sure.
I don't know if you can actually die in there, but you will continually take damage.
Interesting.
Which is kind of weird. And then you jump back to the main quest here, and you go to what I actually remember this part pretty well. It's called Hunter's Edge, one of the final parts of the game. The final main quote unquote village, where I'm not saying enemies are friendly, but there's a bunch of monsters in there, and it's kind of an uneasy truce between all the monster factions.
Yep.
You finally get some closure to the orc quest that starts in the first part of the game that doesn't really get any traction until now, like bits and pieces. It doesn't really have much to do with the main game until you get here to Hunter's Edge. And I think the quests here in Hunter's Edge are among some of the most interesting in the game because they involve you like trying to change sides with all the factions. Do you side with this person over this person?
There's actually some decision making.
Mm-hmm. Watches orcs like kill each other because they feel like it. It's an interesting spot. The main quest here is going to the wizard's house and giving you the wizard amulet, and that unlocks the next part of the game. It's actually really funny, and it harkens back to really old RPGs, the Phantom Forest. If you don't do the wizard's house quest, it gives you an amulet that lets you enter the forest. If you enter the forest, how do you just die?
Oh, that's really funny. Good Lord.
You walk in and just game over.
That's awesome.
Oh, man. And now you face another major character of the game. Her name is Cassandra. And you have to make a major decision here. Kill her or kill Arhu.
But I mean, you're not going to kill Arhu.
I know, right?
Like, he's been your man, like, the whole game. I remember when we played this, you may remember more details than me, but we got to this part, and it seems like the easy decision is to kill Arhu because she is invincible, but I think you have to go off and solve a long quest, or it's kind of obtuse about how to not kill him, but it is possible, and you should kill her.
Yeah, you are absolutely correct. I think that's the choice they're trying to make you take here. Whether do you go the extra mile to try and kill Cassandra, which involves you going to do another quest and do a bunch of other stuff, or do you take the easy way out and kill Arhu to further the quest?
Right.
I mean, to me, I say no, absolutely not.
You're not going to kill the cat guy who's helped you the whole game.
Right, and he's funny. No, he's great. We love Arhu. Ugh. I don't know why. If you chose to kill Arhu, I don't know. If you want to tell us why you did it, aside from convenience, please let us know.
I would love to know the breakdown of who did and who didn't.
Actually, yeah. Let us know in the comments. Did you choose to kill Arhu or not?
I want to know if Larian has that information from their general player base, kind of like how Mass Effect, they know the breakdown of decision-making of their players.
That'd be kind of cool, actually. Yeah. So this, now we're getting onto the quest to find Cassandra's weakness, because I think in a game of terrible puzzles, I think this one's actually really cool. Greg.
So this puzzle is awesome. So we've complained a lot that the puzzle solving in this game is really obtuse and annoying, but this puzzle was really clever. So how it works is you have to go on this platform, and either you or your co-op partner has to die.
Yep.
And then when you die, the player who dies gets transported to the next area.
Yep.
But the only way to follow them, like at the beginning of the game, you're given these items called like pyramid cubes or teleportation pyramids or something like that.
Yep.
And what you have to do is the person who died has a pyramid in their inventory, and then the player who's alive has to use their pyramid because it would bring you to the exact location of your co-op partner. So in theory, like you have gone to the realm of the dead with your partner, and then you just revive the co-op partner who's dead. So it was very clever. I really liked this a lot. I thought it was awesome. And this took us like days to figure out. We refused to use a guide. I remember you came in one day, you said, dude, I got it. And then we ended up figuring it out, and I cheered. It was awesome.
Yeah, you know, in a game that has really awful puzzles that I really do like give this game a negative for puzzle solving, this one's really cool.
It was very cool.
I've never really seen anything like it before. But in this area, that's where you find Cassandra's weakness. You find Cassandra's true body. If you destroy it, then the Cassandra in the above worlds, or whatever you want to call it, will be able to be killed for real.
Yep.
So now you're onto the last part of the game, which is going to the Source Temple.
Yep.
And finally, you can make use of that Death Knight spell, because there are actually Death Knights here.
Yeah, it's an undercooked feature.
Yeah, I wish it was a little bit more to it. But
even the part where you have to sneak around, at least it gives you some variation in the gameplay, but it's just like too obtuse and annoying.
I agree. So next you find the wizard Zandalor, and you embark on his quest, and he will go to the homestead as the final piece of the puzzle to completing the main game. So now it's time for the finale. It's also a point of no return. So you have to be aware of that. But I don't know. I want to get your opinion on stuff like this too. to get to the main game, to get to the end game, like I alluded to earlier, you have to get 12 blood/star stones to actually get there. And those are done. They're found throughout the world. You'll find some during the main quest, but usually off the beaten path, doing side quests. And you cannot continue the game without getting the 12 bloodstones. How do you feel about features like this, maybe in this game or in games in general?
You know what's interesting? I didn't even know that. I don't remember all of the details of our first playthrough. We were so thorough when we played this. I thought we just had enough and did it. I didn't even realize it was a requirement. There's a Fire Emblem game where this happens, where there is a quote-unquote optional item or optional items you need to complete the game or get the real ending. I guess I don't like it, but in this game, if you're thorough, you're gonna get them anyway. And I'm not sure, like, is it similar to like Mario 64? You don't need all the stars, but you need enough to continue. I don't really know. I mean, I think it's fine, but in this kind of game, if you like this kind of game, you're going to be so thorough anyway, where I don't think it's hugely egregious. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it hurts replayability a little bit. Because if you're going to, like in our second playthrough, we're not going to be doing every single quest again. What we did was we looked up every single quest that gives us a star stone.
Yep.
Just to make sure we complete it. And I think that does hurt a little bit.
Sure.
Although on a first playthrough, there's a pretty good chance you'll have all of them if you were thorough enough.
Yeah.
But I guess it depends on how you play the game.
If it's your first play, it may be irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So once you speak to Leandra, the final battle commences. You face off against this ancient being that Zigzag spoke of during the lore drop in the beginning of the game. It's called the Trife.
Yep.
He'll summon allies, but it's not too bad of a fight. You also have this like god guy, Astarte with you, who's pretty powerful, and he'll help you out during the fight. But once you kill him, you'll have one last chance to mess with your equipment, do anything you need to do aside from leaving the room, because then you get to the actual final battle, the Void Dragon.
Yes, sir.
Which is actually on the back cover of the game. If you look closely, it's really weird. They put the final boss on there.
That's cool.
Yeah. But you have no idea if you're just looking at the box art.
No.
So let's talk about our fight with the Void Dragon, because our final fights in these games are always really funny.
Why don't you recount the details, because our final boss fights in these games are always like really funny. So why don't you go ahead?
They're both pretty funny. So I remember this fight's pretty tough. We were getting through it, but at the very end, it was your turn. We weren't exactly sure what to do, because like one wrong move could have meant the end for us. And you were like, okay, so what should I do here? You use Shackles of Pain. And I was like, okay, you're gonna use Shackles of Pain. I'll cover our backs next turn, and then we'll see what happens the turn after. You use Shackles of Pain, the Void Dragon ended up killing himself.
Oops, got him.
It's like, oh, I guess we beat it. Hooray, we did it.
I think what we should do for the audience is maybe talk about what our party setup was the first time through. I believe you were dual-wielding wands.
That's right, yep.
And you also had J-Han with you. I think I was Sword and Board.
I think you were Sword and Board.
Yeah, and I also had Bear Doter with us. We affectionately refer to her as Barry. What's really funny is we called Bear Doter Barry and J-Han John.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like this really weird, like, inside funny joke we had throughout the whole game.
Affectionately, Barry and John, our two mainstay party members throughout, usually when we play this game. So it's great that you brought that up, because I was going to get into them a little bit more, like the real people you can get on your team aside from random NPCs. So let's get into some of these other characters. We've mentioned kind of the big ones already, like Arhu.
Yeah.
We don't have to mention them again. But so the first character you'll likely run into to recruit is Medora.
I don't think we ran into her at all our first time through.
We may not have, which is kind of funny. You should, because she's in the pub and you have to go to the pub for the main quest. But I think we walked right by her, probably.
Yeah, we just never met her.
But she's a two-handed warrior.
Yep.
And her home, and she's a source hunter and hunter's edge. That's her backstory here. Every one of these characters has a little backstory and quests that you can complete. They're a little undercooked in this one. You don't have to do them. They get more expanded on in the next game, but that's really Medora's deal. We typically don't use or need Medora when we play this game, because one of us tends to be melee anyway.
One of us is tanking.
Yeah. And she's a two-handed warrior, which both of us have a penchant for hitting things with big weapons.
Yeah, sure.
Next guy here, though. This is our guy.
J-Han.
J-Han.
John.
He is our dude. He's a wizard. He specializes in aerotheurge, which is air magic, and hydrosophist, which is water magic, which, as we said earlier on, is so important, especially early on. He's going to be your main both healer and status dealer with electrifying people, stunning people, I should say, and freezing people in their tracks. He is incredibly helpful, even if you already have a mage with you.
Having two mages in your party is just helpful.
And he's even useful if you have another mage with Hydrosophist.
Yes.
Because being able to freeze people with two different characters is very important.
Very helpful.
Very helpful. So Jahan's cool because he's also a recurring character in the franchise.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's a recurring character because he's hundreds of years old because he made a deal with the demon Balberith.
Oh.
So he keeps coming back.
That's right.
Pretty much. You can resolve this quest later on in the game as well, like you can resolve Medora's. Next person is Bear Daughter, who we affectionately refer to as Barry.
That's right.
She is one of our mainstay party members because neither of us really do archery in any RPG. We're not really bow guys, not really. So, and Bear Daughter is the only archer that you can get aside from building a random NPC in the House of Heroes. She's funny because she's a prisoner and she starts with absolutely nothing. And she doesn't start with any moves that stun or incapacitate enemies without using special arrows. So she may not be super useful in the beginning, but long range damage in this game is incredibly helpful.
Yep.
Especially with bows, because some enemies have incredible resistances.
Yep.
So having arrows is very helpful.
And just keeping enemies away from you is helpful.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty much. So her backstory here is she was raised in a forest.
By what?
By a bear.
Yep.
Hence her name being Bear Daughter.
The daughter of bears.
Daughter of bears. And the wizard who took her back to society was captured by a witch, and her personal quest is to find that witch, which you can resolve later on in the game. The last party member who we don't really use, his name is Wolfgraf.
Wolfgraf.
Yeah, he's cool because I've never really seen this before. He's mute. He can't speak because of a source magic that was cast on him, and he communicates with you with this never-ending ink quill.
That's interesting.
That he'll just write down notes to your party members whenever he wants to quote-unquote speak with you. He's a rogue like Bear Daughter, but he's the backstabby kind.
Yep.
And that's not typically our thing, not usually, so we don't really take him along. He's also kind of hidden, so it's very possible you may miss him.
Did we miss him the first time?
We may have actually missed him the first time. And I mean, if you already have a party of either two of Medora, Jahan, or Bear Daughter, you really don't need him
you don't really.
in your party. I feel like he's the most useless one.
Yep.
Which is unfortunate because I feel like he's a pretty cool character. All right, so we're going to get on to the conclusion of Divinity Original Sin 1. A great thing for Larian, and I'm sure they were stoked to hear this. This game was really one of their first critically acclaimed games. It might be their
and commercial.
At that time. Yeah, commercially and critically acclaimed. It won IGN's Best PC Game of the Year in 2014.
Yep.
And it also won a couple more awards. It won Rock Paper Shotgun's Best Kickstarter Award in 2014.
You know what? I'm going to make a statement.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here. I not to offend anyone. I think this is probably the best Kickstarted game ever.
I think at the time it was.
I think it still stands.
I think it was broken by 2.
No, what I mean is, in my personal opinion, it's the best Kickstarted game ever made.
I understand.
Like not to offend other games that were Kickstarter games, but
you mean like financially notwithstanding?
Yeah,
this
exactly.
Is like the best.
Yeah,
one.
in my view, this is the best game pound for pound that has ever been made or funded by Kickstarter. I can't think of a better game that was started and funded this way. I think it just takes the cake.
It holds up with a lot of other RPGs.
It fucking rules.
And it was a Kickstarter game.
Yeah.
Incredibly cool that they managed to do this. I mean, they kickstarted $1 million. In terms of game development, that's not a lot of money.
No way.
They spread that money and they got every single penny's worth.
Especially now, some indie game budgets are $5 to $7 million.
Yep. Pretty much. And $1 million for this game back then was probably huge, and Larian absolutely needed it.
It had to have been a skeleton crew dev team, right?
Larian had about 30 employees after Ego Draconis, so they did not have much to work with here.
Pretty thin.
So good on them. They made a fantastic game. I mean, if we're talking just 2014 and not the Enhanced Edition in 2015, this is probably the best game in 2014.
Oh God, yeah. What did I call it earlier? My Dark Horse Game of the Year? Like, it was my Game of the Year. It's awesome.
I'm glad it got the awards that it got, because I think it really deserves the Best PC Game of the Year.
Are we going to final thoughts on this one?
We're not. I will say we're not going to grade it yet. We're going to grade it when we do the second one.
Sure. Okay.
So final thoughts.
Okay. Final thoughts. I'll tee this up for you. So I think that this game, in terms of mechanics, it may have the best combat mechanics that I have ever seen. It may be the best TAC combat I have ever played. Yeah, it's not an action game because those are very different, but that's what I think.
I'm actually inclined to agree because while the tactical part of it, like the moving around thing with the bubbles, obviously other games have done that before. It's not exactly a new concept, but the way they make all of these skills and elements and weather work together.
It's amazing.
Some games may do that now, but back in 2014, I didn't play a lot of RPGs where that happened.
Yeah, and what I loved about this too is we made fun of the puzzle solving a lot in this game, but what I thought was so funny, like I laughed and smiled so much playing this game because there are moments where I'm like, Nick, I can't jump there, but can you teleport me there? Can you just dump me there? It was so funny. There's so much ingenuity, and I'm going to say this in a funny way, but I feel like I just don't laugh or smile when I play games. Like, I feel like I'm always disappointed or I'm always mad. But when we played this game, like, I was so into just sitting next to you and not only strategizing out every moment of combat, but, solving puzzles and teleporting around and derping around. This game is just so much fun to experiment with and with all the numbers and stats. It was just a blast to play.
I think the level of ingenuity, and I'll say it, Rivellon, the world that Divinity takes place in, is incredible. It's an incredibly magical world. There's a lot of things to exploit, a lot of places to teleport each other to. I didn't even mention the teleporter spell in the beginning, like where you can just pick people up and throw them somewhere.
Yeah, and what I think is so neat, and I'll end my thoughts here because I'm saying the same thing over and over again. I just love how spells in combat can be used outside of combat and puzzle solving. A little bit of that golden sun drip drip. You got me?
Ooh, you're right. Little overworld puzzle solving with it too. Yeah, so my final thoughts here. I adore this game.
It's wonderful.
I mean, this is a game that I can pick up and play almost any time I feel like it.
Yeah, we played for an hour before we recorded, and I said to you, do you just want to beat it? I kind of want to finish it.
It's like, yeah, do you want to record or do you want to just keep playing the game?
I want to keep playing the game.
No, this game, it holds a special place for me, I think, as one of the best games I think I have ever played.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, we'll hold off on grading for now. We'll get to that when we cover the end at the end of the episode. So if you're looking for our grades, make sure to listen to us talk about the next game here, Divinity Original Sin 2. Not to be confused with Divinity 2. This is a totally different game.
They're different.
It's actually, I say that with purpose. If you go to Divinity 2, Ego Draconis, or Dragon Knight Saga page on Steam, it actually has a banner that says, are you sure you're not looking for Original Sin 2? This is a different game.
No one's looking for Ego Draconis, dude.
So be sure if you want to check these games out, Divinity Original Sin 2 is what we're talking about now. All right. So much like its predecessor, Original Sin 2 functions very similarly to Original Sin 1 in the way you move around the world and the combat. The only thing is that it takes place about 1,000 years after Divinity Original Sin 1. Now, much like its predecessor, it was also a Kickstarter game.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And it pretty much doubled the first game's Kickstarter, earning about $2 million. And it had 43,000 backers on Kickstarter. That is a lot.
That's a lot.
And it first came out for PC in 2017. So about 3 years after Original Sin 1. And then they did the same thing a year later where they released an enhanced edition called, I believe this one's called the Definitive Edition, which came out on all the current consoles and was auto-updated on PC.
That's what we played.
Same deal as the other one. I don't believe there's any merit into playing the original. But again, if there were some interesting quirks to the original that Greg or I did not experience because we played the console version, let us know. We'd be interested to see what it is. And again, one of the major differences is that this game can be played in 4-player co-op.
That's right, but we did too.
We did too, but you can play this online with 4 people. And again, after playing this game for a second time, I do still maintain that these games are better with co-op, even the second one is. I do think the second one's a little bit more palatable when you don't play with somebody, but I do think they're infinitely more fun.
You're right.
And I think right off the bat, the extra money and what they learned from Divinity Original 1 really showed. I think the quality of this game, how they use the resources in terms of the writing, the world building, the art, everything. I think there's a marked improvement over everything as far as that goes. And I think they did a really great job with allocating their resources here. So, as I said, Divinity Original Sin 2 takes place over 1,000 years after Original Sin 1. And this time you are a sorcerer, and eventually you find out you are a godwoken. After being taken to a prison for your powers, you escape and embark on your quest to become the next divine. So essentially, in the first one, you were hunting sorcerers. In the second one, you are a sorcerer. Do you have any initial thoughts on Original Sin 2 before we get into mechanics?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to get into gripes right away because my main gripes are really the mechanics.
No.
But I don't really have any emotional investment in the story of these games. I feel like the bread and butter is really the combat and the mechanics and how it's all interlinked together. So why don't you maybe get into the nitty gritty and we'll get into all the details of the mechanics and go from there.
I would agree with that. I think we're going to jump into mechanics right off the bat here. They are really similar, like combat essentially the same as Original Sin 1. You move around the battlefield, as in like the moving around the battlefield using AP, the way you attack is all kind of the same, which is not a bad thing. You know, they're kind of just iterating on a process that already worked. So before we get into the actual mechanics of the fighting, we'll get in creation a little bit because they did change things up, and one very interesting change that we'll get to as well. So character creation is very improved now. You can now choose different races, and different races have different abilities, which is pretty cool. If you've played RPGs or any sort of fantasy games, you're pretty familiar with the races of human, elf, and dwarf. We don't really need to go into them too much. They all have their specific abilities that they can do. But the one thing that I will mention is elves can now eat corpses and now eat body parts to learn things. That's their special skill.
A little blue mage cannibalism.
That's right. That's right. But the two new races that I want to talk about are lizard and undead.
It's so strange how you can play as undead.
It's so cool. So first I'll talk about lizards. I think the lizard race is a really fun take on a race. It's mostly because all the lizards you run into in the game are like all snooty asshole aristocrats.
Yeah.
And you can now play as one. And their cool little quirk is that they can dig piles of sand without a shovel, which is kind of cool. But now I want to get into undead. I honestly love this. I think it's so ingenuitive what they did, because not only is it kind of funny, it has a lot of really cool combat aspects too. So you cannot heal them with regular healing spells.
It'll hurt
If you were
them.
to cast regeneration, healing, whatever, it will hurt them. But they get healed from poison. So what you can do is you just keep like a poison barrel with you and just keep filling up vials with poison. They can just drink it.
It's really
To
strange.
recover their health, and I think it's really funny. But the best part about them is if you make a custom undead character and you make, say, an undead lizard, you also get the lizard's ability to dig holes. So while the undead have all what you'd think of an undead weakness, can't be healed, weakness to fire, they have a lot of other things going for them that might make you want to take one in combat. One of the best ones, I think, is you don't need lockpicks.
Do they use their bony fingers?
They use their fingers.
That's really
Which I think
funny.
is really cool. I think they did a really good job with that. Now, after the races, the one other major thing they did in the character creation was they added something called origin characters. So, origin characters are basically like if Jahan, Medora, and all those from the first game were your playable characters from the beginning and they were more developed. Yeah. We chose not to start with origin characters, but you can totally make your own custom characters if you want. But I think the game really points you in the direction of choosing one of the origin characters as your character that you control and your main character, because you get a lot more story beats.
Yep.
And you have a lot more interesting conversations because they may know NPCs and stuff like that. So a quick intro into the characters. There's I'm going to butcher some of these pronunciations, just FYI. I think it's Ifan Ben Mezd is a mercenary. And now he's tasked with killing the Alexander, which is a prominent antagonist and villain, especially early on in the game. You have Lose, who is a musician, but she has a spirit inside her mind that is trying to take her over. So throughout the game, you will get her just going insane and doing like hurting herself or hurting other people, even when you don't want her to. Sibyl was one, or Sibyl, however you pronounce that, is someone we actually used on our team. She's a former slave for someone called the Master, who is a lizard, and she seeks revenge. She's what you call a very stabby chick. She has daggers initially. And then next we have Beast, who is a dwarf. What I really like about Beast is he's not your stereotypical, big, short, beefy dwarf guy with big weapon. He's a mage. like canonically, which I think is kind of neat.
You never see dwarf mages.
No, not really.
Not really.
Then you have our guy, the Red Prince, who is an arrogant piece of shit, but he's a fighter and he's pretty good at it.
Mm-hmm.
He is the exiled lizard prince of his empire because he dealt with demons, and now he's being hunted by assassins. The last guy here, his name is Fane, and he is an undead and one of the Eternals, not to be confused with the Marvel movie, The Eternals, something totally different. And he has to hide his face beneath masks because he will scare the shit out of people because he is an undead person walking around.
Yep.
And that's what he does. Having Fane in the party is really cool because he's been around essentially since the beginning of the universe. He knows things, and he will drop a whole bunch of cool lore at you while you progress through the game if he's in your party. If he's not, you may miss these things.
Right.
So it's pretty cool to have him in here. One funny thing about him is his default class is a wizard, and he's kind of a snarky asshole. So if you were to recruit him in the main world, when you recruit an origin character in the main world, it'll prompt you like what class they want to be. They all have something that their generic one. His is a wizard. If you say, I'd like you to be something else, and then say, I'd like you to be a wizard, he'll say to you, you're asking the wizard if he would like to be a wizard. Very astute of you.
It's interesting because you can make generic characters and not use story-based ones, but because you have a 4-person party, you can still recruit some of the main characters later. I wonder if maybe my opinion of the game is skewed down a little because we missed some story.
I think it's possible because I played it solo again with only origin characters, and you do get a lot more options and instead of using generics.
Perhaps it's more interesting.
Yeah, there are some benefits to using generics. You get some exclusive skills that you don't get as characters. But so, do you have anything else to say about the origin characters and how, like, maybe like why they were introduced? Or
I mean, I was surprised that like origin characters were introduced. I'm just a little confused why they let you make generic characters if you're gonna miss so much story. I don't know if they should have included both features. Like, if you're gonna go all in on characters, just go all in. I don't know. Perhaps it was an odd choice to have them both.
Yeah, I was going to say that because they do let you customize the main ones, sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
Like, it's really just like their backstory. That's what it is. You can kind of change what they look like. So I was going to say the same thing. It's a little weird that they still allow you to make a generic custom character. It's like, I don't know. You do miss out on a lot by doing that. I'd love to see like their rationale behind what they were thinking there. Because you can't have a party of 4 generics either.
Right.
Maybe that would be interesting if you could, but you can't do that.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's interesting. And if you went lone wolf on a generic too, then you wouldn't get any party members.
Yeah, and that's an odd choice because you would miss all story. It's odd.
I think it's an odd choice, and I'm not sure if I'm a fan of you having to choose between one or the other.
Yeah, me too.
Anyway, so onto some skills. Not going to go through all of them, but they made some changes to skills and how some abilities work.
Yep.
So speed and perception are gone.
Mm-hmm.
They're replaced with something called memory and wits. Memory is interesting because it allows you to equip more skills. Every point in that gives you more of a bank to memorize abilities. And we'll get more into that later when we talk about the leveling. And wits is essentially perception from the other game. So some abilities that did not return from Original Sin 1, which we alluded to, crafting and smithing are gone. You can no longer do it. How do you feel about them eliminating it?
Okay. I mean, we have to be consistent with goddamn GameCube messaging. I shouldn't say never. I rarely welcome watering down of mechanics or the getting rid of mechanics. Like blacksmithing and crafting was really annoying in, Original Sin 1, but it was still in there. Like when games get watered down, I just tend to not like it and not agree.
Yeah, I don't envy Larian for having to make the decision that you just outlined. I think they realized how irritating their crafting system was and how obtuse it was, and they thought if we get rid of it, people may not like it because some people love crafting systems. They've since, in later editions of this game, they've put in more crafting recipes.
Really?
But the skills, blacksmithing and crafting, those are gone. Those are not coming back. The other ones that are gone, which I'm actually a bit sad to see, is defensive skills.
Yeah, me too.
A lot of them are gone from this one. The only ones that have returned are leadership, perseverance, and retribution, which nothing will help you with status ailments here, which is what a lot of those defensive skills in the first game did. I don't know. I kind of like building tank builds, and this right here, which I'll get into later, will come into one of my major gripes with how combat works.
Yeah, you and I may have the same gripe, but it's a big one.
We may. Yeah. So you got some new abilities here, like Necromancer, which replaced Witchcraft. The reason I'm harping in on here is because it's a magic school that's physical damage based on your intelligence, which I think a lot of games don't do. The first one didn't do. I think it's an interesting way to have your mages be able to do physical damage. And you can now summon minions with the summoning skill. And they can get incredibly powerful. It kind of reminds me of, like, remember the little shadow guys you can summon in Fire Emblem Sacred Stones?
Yes, yep.
You can now summon like a big honk in one of those guys, and they become basically a fifth party member, which is pretty cool. The next major thing I'm going to mention here is source skills and sorcery skills. Yes, those are different things. They're now available to every character because, don't forget, you're a sorcerer now. You can do these things. So now, like, they're unlocked at a certain point of the story, but sorcery skills are unlocked through quests, sometimes through the main story, and they're incredibly powerful, and they take what's called part of the new mechanic source points to use, which are a semi-finite thing here, where once you unlock it, you have a certain amount of source points that you can use for skills, and once you use the point, you have to find a fountain or point of source to restore the points.
Yep, that's right.
So they are incredibly powerful, but you have to make sure, hey, can I go back to town after this fight? Can I afford to use it now?
Yeah, it's like a recoverable stat, but you have to go somewhere to refill it.
I don't entirely mind the source system. How do you feel about it?
I don't mind it.
I think it's pretty good. Tags are pretty interesting. You get them through the game. They're kind of like the first one where you get like the pragmatic tag and stuff like that. It affects how other characters perceive you. But in this one, in the character creator, you put tags on yourself to do that, which is pretty cool. The last change we're going to make, which is probably one of my favorites, is it the most important? I'm going to say it is. It's something very instrumental to your journey. You can now put instruments on every character.
Yeah, you now have like custom music instruments for every character. I don't know why, but
I kind of love it because for every character, you can choose a different instrument. It's either a bansuri, a tambura,
an oud,
and a cello. They have no effect on your stats, no effect on anything combat-wise, but they affect the music that's played in combat. So like the general battle music will have more of a cello theme. If you enter battle with a cello character.
Hat tip to the composer, I think.
Yeah, pretty cool. And if you get a KO, you get like a solo with that character's instrument.
Interesting.
Which I think is really cool. I've never seen this in a game before, and I think it's super inventive, and it's very on brand for Larian to have something so weird.
Yeah, it's very strange, very cute.
Yeah, I like it. All right, so we beat around the bush enough. We got to talk about the major change to combat. We're going to have some thoughts about this. Damage is now split between magical armor versus physical armor. Let me explain real quick. Every enemy, instead of having a flat HP bar, they have magic armor and they have physical armor. Different enemies will have different variations of each. You'll find some may have tons of magic armor and no physical, tons of physical and no magical, or maybe a mix between the two. Both your characters and enemies have this.
Yep.
Armor gives you magic armor and physical armor. Some enemies, it's basically a 2 health bars kind of thing where you have to drain one of the armor types before you can deal HP damage. So before we get into how we feel about this, it also affects things like status ailments, because typically you cannot, unless you have certain talents or whatever, you cannot say freeze somebody unless they are out of magic armor. Greg, let's get into it. What do you think about this change?
So I did not like it at all. I'm normally an advocate for, making combat have more detail, more to think about, more to strategize. But to me, this made combat even more annoying and slow. I just didn't know. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the original flat HP system. I just thought it worked totally fine the way it was. And I don't think it makes this game dysfunctional. It just makes it a lot slower. Like, are you building your party for like armor damage, magic armor damage for HP? And I guess it does make it more sophisticated, but I think it slows the whole game down, and I'm not sure. It just didn't jive with me, even though it functions. It was not my favorite.
Okay. We're going to differ a little bit.
Okay.
A teeny bit. Because the more I played,
I don't know.
The more I understood why they did it.
I'm not saying it doesn't work. It's just I found it unnecessary.
I think one of the reasons they did it was not just to make a change, but I think they wanted to nerf status ailments a little.
Okay.
Because in the first game, it's so easily exploitable with
Yes.
just freezing people, knocking people down.
Yes.
In this one, you can't really do that right off the bat.
Yep.
And I just don't think they wanted people to play the game the same way.
I understand.
Which I get that. I mean, much like building a mixed party, I have mixed feelings about it.
Yeah.
I do like that you have to be a little strategic with what you do. Do you go full bore physical or full bore magical? I don't think there is a right way. I think my opinion is mixed is probably the best way to handle most encounters, because I believe the game is built that way. But if you were to research online, nobody agrees on what the best way to do it.
That probably means they did it right.
No one agrees, although I believe physical damage in this game is more useful and better than magical damage. And I should say, when we're talking about how this affects gameplay, we're talking mostly on the classic and tactical difficulty, not easy mode. We're saying on the game's intended difficulty settings, that's how this affects combat.
So I actually have many problems with the mechanics of this game, but the armor system's only one of them. I think there's a worse problem. Do you have anything else, or can I go on to problem B, which I think is much worse?
Let's go to problem B. Armor's done.
So I have no idea what the fans of our show are going to think about this. I have a big problem with how Divinity Original Sin 2 handles respecialization, respecking your character. I do not like at all that you can respec like whenever you want, as often as you want. It makes me feel like my choices don't matter. Like I'm never going to replay the game. I'm never going to build a different character because I can rebuild my one character at any time. Makes me feel like I can solve any quest. There are no obstacles in my way. I can just change what my character is. I feel like that really defeats the point of what a role-playing game is. You build a character, you're in this world being your character and who he or she is. But when you can respec whenever you want, there's just all problems are eliminated. You can do anything, and there's no finality in your character, and I dislike it a lot. It takes a lot of challenge out of the game and hurts replayability.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of that either. I like some finality when it comes to how I make my character. I'm okay with respecing being in the game because it was in Original Sin 1. It was just very convoluted on how to do it. And it cost a lot. You can't just go and do it.
Exactly.
In that first one, in Divinity Original Sin 1, you could respec, but you lost every single one of your abilities. You had to basically remake your character from scratch, which I think is a good penalty for respecing. In this game, you keep everything. You really, all you need to do is buy new skills for the abilities you're speccing into. It's not my thing. I think we are differing. We have differing opinions than the populace. I think the populace likes being able to respec whenever.
No.
I believe that that's considered a good change in terms of the internet. I'm sure there are some holdouts like us who don't like that.
Dude, this is an audio-only podcast, but my hands are covering my face. Like, come on, guys.
Although one thing I do think is good about it is this game is hard.
Yeah.
And if you're really struggling in the beginning and you just cannot beat it, I think it is a good alternative than making people restart the whole game.
Fuck them. Be better. Fuck you.
Be better. That's all. I'm trying to think of the positives here. I think that's one of the positives that I have.
Well, we've talked about this before on the podcast. What's the word? We talked about it with Bill on BioShock. Is it rate of completion? Vita Chambers helped more people beat the game.
I'm not sure what Divinity Original Sin 1's clear rate is. That game was not easy.
Clear rate, thank you.
I don't think that game was easy.
No.
It's definitely not easy. I can see some people putting it down because it's too hard. And because the story of Original Sin 1 is not that compelling. I could see someone putting it down for that reason. So I'm not sure what Larian's clear rate on it, but I can see why they would put the mechanic in the game, even if I don't necessarily agree with it.
You know, it's so hard, man. You're probably right, but in this room, we just don't like it and we don't agree with that choice.
Right. I don't necessarily like it. The last mechanic I want to talk about is leveling. I actually vastly prefer the leveling in this game to 1. So in Divinity Original Sin 1, when you level up, you get your ability points and whatever. Those points are the way you level is kind of cumulative, where if you are level 1 in a certain skill, you need to put 2 skill points in to level it up to level 2, and you need to put 3 to put it to level 3, etc., etc. I don't really like that. I prefer how in this game you can just keep leveling something. Like in Divinity Original Sin 2, you level up, you can put, let's say your pyrotechnic is 6. You put a point in it, it goes to 7.
Oh, sure.
I don't necessarily like the cumulative one because I do think it detracts from the leveling experience a little bit. You don't level up a lot in these games. You might get to like 21, 22 by the end of it. And if you're in the first game, if you're spending 7 or 8 of those levels doing nothing.
That's right. I mean, you spend several levels doing nothing.
Which I think kind of curbs progression a little bit. So I do prefer the way they level.
I agree with that.
In this game. I also prefer the memorizing skills part of this game of Divinity Original Sin 2 as well. In 1, depending on the level of the skill you have, is how many of a certain type of magic or skill you could have.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you were adept, you could have up to 2 adept skills,
yep.
Something like that. In this one, it's all governed by your memory.
I don't dislike it. I think it's fine. I don't mind it either way.
I think I prefer memory over the other one.
Well, it's for game balancing. It's just how they balance spells in the game.
And because in the Divinity Original Sin 1, if you accidentally learned a skill, there's no unlearning it. So you have to level up the skill again if you want to learn more.
Right.
So you can kind of screw yourself.
Yep.
So I much prefer the way they did it in this game. But anyway, let's move on to the presentation aesthetics. I think the extra budget really went a long way. All the new characters have art. They have intro movies. I think the game world generally looks fairly similar.
They're pretty much the same. It's the top-down gothic thing, sort of.
So I think it looks fine. I have no issues with the way it looks graphically. But they did hire a new composer, because as we said, for Original Sin 1, their composer passed away. So their new composer is Borislav Slavov.
Yep.
He did work on Crisis 2 and 3 and Reese, Son of Rome. And now he is now Larian's mainstay composer.
Do you mean Rise, Son of Rome, the Xbox game?
Sorry, Rise, not Reese. Rise, Son of Rome. And he is also now working with Larian and all their other projects as well. All right. So before we get into story, do you have anything else you want to say about presentation or mechanics?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot to say about mechanics.
Yeah.
Presentation, no. I mean, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah, I would agree. I have no main gripes. Maybe it could have been a little better now that it's been 3 years.
I just don't think fans care about it.
I definitely don't.
Me either.
For a game like this, presentation and graphics mean very little.
Not at all.
Not at all to me. All right. So there's a lot of lore here. I want to say to everybody listening, this game especially, there is a lot of lore. There is a lot going in on the background. We are not going to be covering the full extent of that lore. We'll be in this room for 6 hours.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
We're not doing that, but we will go through the story and through some of the important parts and some of our iconic moments. Because I do think there are a few. You are a captive on a ship because you are not a source hunter. You are a sorcerer. People do not like you. They want to see you captured. So you are, and your source powers are initially sealed away within a collar around your neck, which has a really cool gameplay integration because you cannot equip a necklace.
Interesting.
Which is pretty cool because you have that collar on. When enemies called Voidwoken attack your ship because of a mysterious woman called Wendigo, you're thrown overboard, but are saved by one of the 7 gods, depending on who your character is and what race they are. And you wash up on the coast of what's known as an island called the Reaper's Eye. And that god will now refer to you as the Godwoken. Here's a fun fact. Wendigo is also the narrator of the game. And she is a recurring NPC and boss in this game, frequently. So you find your way to really one of the most miserable places I've ever seen in a video game. Every NPC is either mean, B, a sorcerer bound by a collar, C, a servant, D, out to kill you, or E, some combination of all the above.
Yep.
And it has the most perfect name ever for such a shithole of a place.
Fort Joy. Yay.
I love it. I love it so much.
Fort Joy is a miserable piece of shit place.
Miserable, shitty place that nobody wants to be. Essentially, Fort Joy is a prison where magisters rip the source out of sorcerers and make them into these mute, monstrous people called silent monks. So as you walk around, you will see these people who cannot speak to you. That is your fate if you choose to remain on Fort Joy. So, and you really need to exercise caution here because this isn't Scythial anymore. You have no equipment, you have no skills, You say the wrong thing to someone, you will be attacked and killed.
Yep.
And your first objective is to escape this hellhole. But there are a lot of really cool ways you can escape. Like, if you want to, you can brute force your way through by killing the Magisters. You can help a trapped undead man named Withermore, or save a small child and have him take you out via a boat, or escape from the sewers.
Mhm.
So there is not one linear way to escape from Fort Joy. There's a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah, it's cool.
So, Greg, I want to ask your opinion. How do you feel about Fort Joy as an intro, like this oppressive start to a game, instead of something like Cyseal, where it's very nice?
So I'm going to make maybe a weird through line here. It actually reminds me a lot of Wind Waker.
Oh.
Do you remember that like prison fortress near the beginning of the game when you're running around as a 3-heart Link?
Great comparison.
I think they're very similar because they're both very oppressive. It's not like fun, haha, except quests in a town. It's like you can't do much. It's very restrictive. You're trying to escape. There's not much you can do, and it's like very oppressive. So it's very different than your generic except side quest town. It's like the opposite. It's very strange.
So, I mean, it's just so fun. I love Fort Joy as a starting area. I think it's one of the best starting areas in a video game that I've seen, just because it's so different and so oppressive. And it's also brutally hard, which I can see why it would turn new players away. A lot of new players have said that Fort Joy is too hard. And
very restrictive.
You know what? I sympathize. It's pretty tough.
I say again, fuck you.
So, you get off the boat and into Fort Joy. All of the origin characters that you didn't select are scattered among the beach or in the town, and you can choose to recruit them into your party and give them, essentially make them whatever class you want. They have their like start of what they're known for, but you can kind of build your party as you want to. Like for us, we chose Sabile and the Red Prince. And you can kind of choose however you want them to be to suit your party's needs. But the good thing about Fort Joy, while your objective is to escape, you can take your time and you can just sort of get your feel with the game and hopefully not piss too many people off. Here, you'll also learn about some of the game's major antagonists, like Alexander, who I mentioned earlier, and Dallas. Not Dallas like the city, but Dallis, who is a major antagonist in this game. You can also get your source collar removed here doing the Arena of the One side quest, where if you don't do this, you'll have to wait till the end of the act to get your source collar removed. So after you escape, you're put into a place called the Hollow Marshes, where the game really opens up. You can still return to Fort Joy at this point. Like, if you escape through the sewers, you can go back through the sewers. No one's going to stop you. The one thing that I don't really like, I think there was there might have been a missed opportunity from them. When you get your source collar removed and escape from Fort Joy, the Magisters don't comment on it.
Okay, so if you like return or whatever,
it's like it doesn't really make a lot of sense to go back.
Yeah, what do they call that?
Story-wise, so it's like
ludonarrative dissonance.
Yeah, it's like there's no real. Some people, like townspeople, might comment that your source collar is gone, which is kind of cool, but there's really no consequence to going back. Which I feel like after you escape this oppressive place,
they should have thought of this.
I feel like going back would be like, oh, the Magisters are on to you in some sort of way.
Yeah, of course.
That's all right. So what you do with the Hollow Marches, you meet this resistance group called the Seekers. They want to kill the Magisters and steal their ship called the Lady Vengeance and escape the island called the Reaper's Eye. So once you help them and board the ship, you'll be forced to leave the Reaper's Eye and Fort Joy forever. It makes sense story-wise. Why would you ever want to go back to the Reaper's Eye? But it presents one of the larger changes made to exploration in this game that they didn't do in Divinity Original Sin 1. Once you've finished with an act, like Fort Joy and the Hollow Marshes are, you cannot return. Whereas Original Sin 1, once you complete the Cyseal part of the game, you can always go back. How do you feel about this? Permanently missable things.
So I think it's fine. I try to stay consistent on this. I like to be challenged. If I miss something, I miss it, and that's on me. I just think there was nothing wrong with the first game where you could go back to areas. Returning to Fort Joy doesn't make a lot of sense, so not being able to go back, I understand. I'd say generally, I'm okay with missable content. I just don't think it's necessary in Divinity Original Sin, but I mean, however they chose to arrange this was fine. It didn't bother me. I think it's okay.
I think they made the decision purely on story reasons. You escaped. Why would you ever want to go back? I kind of get it. So next, at this part of the game, you're on the Lady Vengeance, a bit of an intermission. This is where respecking is introduced. We've said a lot about respecking up until this point, but this is, unless you install a mod, which there are mods now that put respecking earlier in the game on Fort Joy. But if you were playing the base version of this game, that is this is where you're introduced to respecking. But now this is a critical part of the game because now you pick who you want on your team. You can still freely choose whichever origin characters you want, but whoever you choose for your team will be a part of your party forever. After this game, all of the other origin characters will be killed, essentially. Incapacitated, killed. There's a little wonky what happens to them, but they will essentially be unavailable to you after this part of the game.
Yep.
It's actually a pretty cool fight, what you have to do. Dallas attacks the boat, and you have to protect Malady until she finishes casting her spell, which essentially you're fending off hordes of like Void Woken until she finishes, and you don't really have to kill anybody to win. You just have to survive.
You gotta wait it out.
You have to wait it out. If Malady dies, it's over. What's really cool about it, too, I think it's you can also drag Dallas over and kill her early. It just gives, and you show like her true form. When that happens, you can get a powerful weapon for doing so, which is pretty cool. So after this, you'll be teleported to the Hall of Echoes, and you'll be forced to choose a god to follow. I don't really know why you have to do this. It's a story thing, but it has no gameplay effect. It's a story-wise choice, and it's necessary to continue. So now the objective of the game changes. Your new goal is to become the next Divine, and you'll be fighting against your party members to make this happen. You're all going to be fighting to become the Divine. Like, your central goal is one of you is going to become Divine, and your team is going to try and do it, but only one of you can become Divine. So the next part of the game is called Mastering the Source, and you land on a place called the Reaper's Coast, and Driftwood is your new town, and the Lady Vengeance is your hub. It's kind of like Homestead, but not nearly as big, but I think that's a good thing, because Homestead was a little bit in Original Sin 1.
Right, sure.
The main quest here is Powerful Awakening, and your goal is to get your source points, which you mentioned earlier, to cast your source magic. And you can choose from 3 different masters. There's 7 of them, and you can only choose 3, and they all have varying degrees of, like, evilness.
Yep.
So, like, sorcery in these games, while you're technically the heroes here, sorcery is still considered kind of evil. So when you're choosing one of these, you kind of have to take the lesser of 7 evils here, unless you really feel like being a major asshole, and choose one of the 7 people who are like demons. We won't go into like what all the source people are, but just know there are 7 of them, and they have various amounts of influence on the game, depending on who you choose. This main quest will take up pretty much all of your time on the Reaper's Coast, but there's a lot to do here. This place is pretty big. But after you're done, you embark for, unfortunately, what I think is the weakest part of the game. It's called the Nameless Isle. It's the main thing here is you have to find someone called the Sallow Man. But remember the Sallow Man's name. He becomes very important later on. He's the right-hand man of this mysterious God King and the leader of the Black Ring group, who also employ that character Wendigo. And he is generally a very powerful character. Now, you enter this place called the Academy, and you need to fight in the last arena. Completing this earns you the title of the One, which makes sense with the quest called Arena of the One.
Like Neo.
Oh. Sorry, the Matrix. Yeah, we're the One now.
Yeah,
Sorry
right.
about that. Then after this, you get a point of no return, and some pretty batshit crazy shit happens here. Your goal is to make it this place called the Wellspring, and whoever touches it will become the next Divine. But remember all the origin characters left behind. Hey, they're back. They got revived-ish, and now they're going to stop you. So as you approach the Wellspring, Dallas comes back, and she fucking hits it with a hammer, and it's gone. No one becomes a Divine. The arena blows up, and the gods are really pissed, and they put you in another fight where they become Source Titans, and they copy your entire party. Malady comes to save you and escape on the Lady Vengeance. What do you think about this part of the game? I didn't have a lot of fun playing through it.
Yeah, I didn't either. I also, this game, Nick, you actually brought this up when you were talking about a different game.
Oh, okay.
You said, like, you don't really love plots where you, sorry, we went to go do a thing, but oops, it didn't work.
Yeah.
Or like, oops, sorry, we actually have to go here. Like, and this kind of does that.
Yeah.
Right? Where you get into, like, this combat scenario where you have to go touch this thing. Oh, wait, I went up to touch it. Oh, oops, you can't.
You can't do it.
Not my favorite.
It's not my favorite storytelling technique either. I think this part of the game I compare to Divinity Original Sin 1's like immaculate quest line.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, just got to get through it. Just got to get through it. But anyway, now you come to the last area of the game, which is called Arcs, and the main quest called Hammerfall. It's a massive city with a lot of underground areas, and it's now considered the center of power of the Divine Order, and everyone is aligned with this man, Lucian the Divine. As evidenced by his name, he is the Divine. So to become the Divine, he can no longer be the Divine.
Sure.
So he is your objective. And the place is rightfully pretty fucked up. There's Voidwoken everywhere. You need to fight off a Kraken to even get into the city, which is a pretty cool fight. There's even a pile of corpses up front, which is a really convenient way for you to recover source points, because you can eat corpses to recover your source. Fun fact, Arcs is based on the city of Ghent in Belgium, which is one of Larian's development studios.
Oh, well, hat tip to them for being shitty, right? I've never been there. I'm sure it's fine.
I'm sure it's fine. I just take care of the corpse problem, please.
Yeah.
I really like this part of the game. Arcs, I think, is really cool to explore. It almost reminds me of a bigger Sicil, where there's a lot of quests to do just within a city.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really messed up. So it's not just like you're going through this stereotypical RPG town. It's kind of like if Hunter's Edge and Sicil had a baby.
Sure.
That's how I envision Arcs. And many of your companion quests will meet their climax here, so be sure to explore. There's some really cool, atmospheric, like you can sense this is it. This is where everything is going to come to blows. So here's some important NPCs you need to know about. There's Isbiel, however you pronounce that, is the dwarven vassal of the God King. Linder Krem is the leader of paladins and arcs. And a man called the Doctor, who is actually the demon Adramalik, not the summon in Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. And he desires divinity as well. He is also the demon occupying Losei's mind. And he's very important to deal with. And as a side note here, you can meet Arhu here.
Hey, Catman.
Catman's back, where you have the choice to again save him. And if you do, you can help advance the main plot, which is the final dungeon, which is the Crypt of Lucian. It's all right.
It's fine.
It's fine. It's a final dungeon. I don't really recall too many outstanding parts of it. There's a lot of annoying puzzles, which, of course, we say we don't love in these games.
Yeah, they're kind of obtuse and annoying.
Yep. But this one in particular involves one of my least favorite RPG puzzles, aligning pipes to get the flow of something correct.
Perfect.
I fucking hate that shit.
Yeah.
That and like walking on ice puzzles.
Or sliding puzzles.
Hate that shit.
Yep.
It's like my least favorite things. There are less puzzles in this game than Original Sin 1, but they're still kind of annoying here.
Yep.
So now you get into the final battle, which is called the End Times. You're confronted by Lucian the Divine, who has actually been alive the whole time. Surprise! And
one of these.
One of these. And then Dallas, who is here again. And your old friend, Divinity Original Sin 1, who we told you to remember, Brachus Rex
Our
is
guy.
here. Our boy Brachus Rex is back. He's under Dallas's control. And by the way, she's an Eternal and also Fane's daughter, which is revealed, I guess, at some point. So she is an undead. And she has had a fake face on the whole game.
Got it.
Which
Okay.
is kind of cool. So you'll be given a buff by everyone aboard the Lady Vengeance, which lowers the cost of all your source skills. They're now free for this fight, so you can keep pounding away with whatever powerful skills you have. But now you're met with a choice. You give up your source and ally with Lucian and Dallas, or you say no and go against them. Whatever choice you make results in Brachus Rex revealing he's not controlled by Dallas, and he fights you anyway, and he becomes the final boss. Kind of comical. I don't hate it, but I think it's fun.
And there's a little bit too much, well, oops, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
It's too much of that in this plot.
Yeah. Although I don't know why. For some reason, I like Brachus Rex. I think he's fun. So I'm kind of okay with him betraying everybody.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you ally with Lucian and Dallas, you'll face off against Brachus Rex with those two as your allies. But if you don't, you have to face all of them. Which I don't understand why Brachus Rex and Dallas would fight against you if Brachus Rex reveals that he's not controlled, but whatever.
I don't know.
Whatever it is. But once you whittle their HP down enough, Brachus summons a recurring enemy, the Kraken, who will summon the Sallow Man, Isbiel, and Linder Krem. This fight is infamous with a lot of people. Nobody likes it, by the way.
No one likes it.
Everyone thinks it's horrendous and horribly difficult. Let's talk about our final fight here.
Well, I mean, this is another one where our final fight was a little bit of a meme,
It was
right?
pretty funny.
Where we were essentially quick saving our way out of this and trying to slowly progress. Do you want to talk a little bit about how we did this?
This is so stupid. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. So, if I recall, I'm alive. Me and maybe one other person. Not you. That's specific here. You are not alive.
Yep.
It's me and maybe one other party member is alive. We're pretty fucked. And I have to choose who I'm going to revive to try and save the run. And we're both thinking Sabine was kind of our healer at this point. So I said you're like, Nick, you should revive Sabine. And I'm like, but kind of like, is this door at like the One Ring here? And she said, no, I'm getting you up. Yeah. And you're like, what?
Yeah, why?
So I revived you, and you managed to tank the incoming blows. And I still think about this sometimes. I had some weird shit on my staff where it made like an enemy take damage over time, and I had hit the final boss twice with it. So I hit him twice. For some reason, that borked his AI, so he ran around in a circle, and he blew up twice, and we won.
Both of these final bosses were just derp fests.
Not intentionally derp fest, but just the way they've happened, which has been kind of funny. So once you've managed to do this fucking horrendous fight, we probably were on this fight for 3 hours.
I hated it.
It was awful.
Everyone hates it.
Everybody hates this fight. If you like this fight, please let us know. But according to internet consensus, we're pretty much with the consensus here, which is kind of rare for this show.
Yeah, kind of rare.
But we are. So once you finally win, you choose your ending. There are so many variations to the endings, depend on what you did throughout the game, that we're not going to talk about all of that.
We don't care about this,
No, we're not going to talk about all these endings. We say experience all of those for yourself, because that's the fun of playing these games multiple times. Every region gets its own ending as well. So I'm just going to go through like the basic endings.
Yeah, sure.
The first one is you ascend to divinity, where one of you becomes the divine, where you have to choose which party member. One of the controlled party members become the divine. We let you have it. You became the divine. Congratulations. And
is that what we picked?
Yeah, you did it.
That's what we picked.
Yeah. And then, so essentially what happens is Rivellon unites under the new divine, but you still wage battle against the void.
Yep.
If you let Lucian remain the divine, the races of Rivellon unite and the void is driven back. And Lucian and Dallas are revered by all. I don't like this ending because these two were considered the antagonists of the game. So it feels like what I just
You're kind of giving them some rope here.
Yeah.
You're kind of like hiding.
Yeah.
That they were bad.
I'm not a big fan of that. You ascend to divinity with the Doctor.
Oh my
which
God.
is a weird one. You and the Doctor rule the world as a divine of light and divine of darkness. The Voidlings are easily defeated, but later a much bloodier war began between you and the Doctor. That's if you make a deal with the Doctor and honor it in the final battle. This one's funny. You choose to say fuck everybody and release Source into the world. All of Rivellon become sorcerers, and they drive the God King back to the void. And the Golden Age comes, but it soon shatters as Source-empowered strive for power, so you really don't solve anything, which is great. You can seal the Veil, which Dallas purges the Source from Rivellon, restoring the Veil and turning sorcerers into silent monks. Malady visits the Hall of Echoes and restores the sorcerer's souls, and Lucian rules the divine, though he does not wield any power anymore, but nobody knows about that. So that's what happens when you choose to give up your source. Again, I don't like this one. Like, what did I do?
Nothing.
Allowing the God King to return. The God King wages war on Rivellon, and the mortal races are overwhelmed and enslaved by the Eternals. Great. That's awesome.
Why would you pick that?
There's no reason to pick that. And the last one here is allow the Eternals to return and seal the God King, which means the Eternals enslave all of the mortal races, but now all of the Eternals rule as equals, which is kind of a whatever ending.
So I guess you should just pick the first one?
Yeah, that's how I was going to ask you, like, does any of these endings really appeal to you?
I mean, not really. I feel like you should either pick the first one, or I guess the second one is the bad guys win, but you just don't take credit and it's fine.
Yeah, I think they wanted to give a lot of player choice, but I'm just like...
Nah, I mean, I've said this a lot on this show. It's too black and white, too much sort of pick your ending.
All right, so now do you have anything else you want to say about the story, about the characters, anything like that before we get into the legacy and whatnot of Larian?
Sure, I'll just reiterate, I don't love how you can build generic characters even though they give you major story characters, but you don't have to play as them. It's a little strange. I don't like the pick your own ending at the end of the game. It's too black and white. I was never really emotionally invested in the story of these games. I think it's kind of whatever. These games are really big on the mechanics and the combat, so not really.
No, I think in general the lore and the writing is overall better than Divinity Original Sin 1.
Yeah, sure.
I do feel like it's more interesting of a story. Where I think that they did hire more writers. That was part of their plan with their Kickstarter money. So I think that went to good use. Although I agree with you on why could you make generic characters, feels like a why.
Also, too much of the story is, oh, you went to do the thing. Well, oops, you can't. It's too much.
Yeah, what's that? There's like Deus Ex Machinima kind of thing.
Yeah.
Sort of things happen throughout the story, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I prefer a little foreshadowing if that's what's going to happen. So anyway, let's jump into the legacy of Larian, and then we'll jump into final thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
I think because of this game, Divinity Original Sin 1, while it was a success, it wasn't their major commercial thing that put them on the map.
Sure.
Divinity Original Sin 2 is what everybody knows Larian for. Everybody knows them for this game, and a lot of people played this one before Original Sin 1.
That's weirder.
Yeah. People didn't know Original Sin 1 existed.
Come on.
Yeah. I know I didn't say in the beginning, but you don't really have to play Original Sin 1 to play this game.
No, you don't.
Kind of different. So I kind of make sense that people will play the most recent one first. But really, Larian is officially on the map, and I think a lot of other smaller devs are taking note of what they're doing, because Larian has made a really prominent rise from almost destitute indie studio to they have some acclaim now and they have money to play with.
Well, I mean, they went from being a bankrupt indie, but I mean, to like, we should talk about this. They're making Baldur's Gate 3, which is a huge franchise. So I would say they are definitely a successful studio now.
And we got to play a little Baldur's Gate 3 at PAX East this year, meaning 2022.
And it was fine.
Pretty cool. I liked it.
Yep.
It played like Divinity.
So I'll take it.
Baldur's Gate. I played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, the Switch re-releases. I like them very much. So I'm really looking forward to when we get Baldur's Gate 3 on console, whenever that will be.
Yep.
So aside from Baldur's Gate 3, there's actually another game they were working on. It was called Divinity Fallen Heroes.
Okay.
Takes place in the same world as Divinity Original Sin 2, but it has been indefinitely on hold since 2019.
Oh, I'm guessing because Baldur's Gate 3 is now a giant project.
There has been no news since, as of this recording, there has been no news of anything about Divinity Fallen Heroes.
Makes sense.
We only have like a 1-minute trailer and some like world building. There's a website or something, but that's really all we have.
Yep.
And I'm thinking maybe we'll get an update once Baldur's Gate 3 has finished development and has done their console cycle.
Of course.
Well.
Yep.
So one thing I want to ask you before we get into final thoughts. This question was asked to me when I was at the Larian booth at PAX.
Ooh.
Do you consider Larian an indie studio still?
Wow. My answer is no. My answer, I think I consider them to be a AA studio now, where, okay, when they were making Ego Draconis, no, they're indie. Were they even an indie studio then? They had a publisher.
They did. They were pretty rough.
They were a shitty AA studio.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I also trying to think, Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, who published those? It was like CDV Publishing. I mean, people I've never heard of, but they're definitely a AA studio now, totally.
I would think so. It's maybe not after Original Sin 1, but with Original Sin 2, I think they would be.
So, I mean, I would say they're a AA studio now, especially if they're doing Baldur's Gate 3, they're huge. Like, you're doing huge games.
Yep.
So, I don't know what you think.
I think I would agree with you. They're definitely like on the cusp of being one of the elite studios.
They're one of the only studios I trust to make something good.
Yeah, I trust them a lot. Despite some of the gripes we've had with this game and in Divinity Original Sin 1 as well, I trust Larian a lot.
They clearly give a shit.
Yeah. We were actually just talking about this a couple days ago. Publishers, developers, game series that we still trust, and that's waning thin.
There aren't very many.
Larian is really one of them, and the Divinity Original Sin / Divinity series is really something that we look forward to.
Yeah, one of the few franchises I trust.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into final thoughts here. Before we get into my final question here, do you have any final thoughts about Divinity Original Sin 2?
Sure. I did not like the mechanical changes to combat, like the armor system, magic armor system. I did not care for it, even though it works just fine. I did not like the respec system at all. It makes me feel like my choices don't matter. I'm never gonna replay it. I can do everything on one character. I don't like that kind of stuff at all. But even with those two major gripes, it is still very similar to the first one. It is a very enjoyable game. And of course, I really enjoyed playing it. They are both very, very good tactical games. I should say the second one is very good as well as the first.
Sure. Yep, that makes sense. I'm very much with you on a lot of that with the changes. Like I said, the physical versus magical armor did grow on me over time. I did feel like the game was less cheesable, and I think from a developer standpoint, that's a good thing.
Yeah, sure.
You don't want your game to be easily cheesed. But so let's get into it. We're gonna do our final thoughts. Which game is better? What are your grades? Would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So the better game is the first one. It's an A- for me. No game is perfect. It does have flaws. The puzzle solving is too obtuse. I don't care about the story. It's kind of glamorous, over-the-top fantasy, but the moment-to-moment tactical gameplay is amazing. I love setting up combat beforehand. I love how the spells interact with the environment. I love the spells outside of combat. Sitting side by side with you, just strategizing the whole game is just lovely. As for the second one, Original Sin 2, I would say it's a B for me. Listen, it's a great game. I love them both. I just did not agree with any of the changes that they made. The changes to the combat, I didn't love it. I do not like the respec system, as I said, and it really hurts the game for me. But I mean, I can't tell you I did not enjoy playing it. Of course, it's very similar to the first one, but I think those two underlying mechanics are too big for me to ignore to give it a similar grade. So it is a B for me.
I think, so I'm going to agree with you slightly.
Yeah, sure.
It's really funny because our conversation here is definitely not what people think. People in the internet infinitely prefer the second one over
That's
the first
bullshit.
one, which I don't think is correct. I do think Original Sin 1 is the better game.
It is.
I've said this to you many times. I feel like Divinity Original Sin 1 with Divinity Original Sin 2's leveling would be a perfect game.
Yeah.
I think that would fix a lot of Original Sin 1's problems. I give Original Sin 1 an A. This is an A game for me.
A.
I love it. And I would give, so this is what I'm going to do. Original Sin 1 and 2 are both A games for me. Original Sin 1 is a high A, like a 96. And Original Sin 2 is like a 94.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I think. Well, because I do appreciate some of the changes they made mechanically. Like no more crafting or blacksmithing skills, I think is a good change.
Yeah, sure.
To me.
It's annoying.
Yeah, to get rid of a lot of annoyances. But one of my major gripes with 2 that I actually did not speak of earlier, 2 had a lot more bugs than I was expecting.
Yeah, it's not as clean.
Which I thought it would be cleaner. They're a bigger company now. They got more money in the Kickstarter. I thought it would have been a cleaner experience, but it wasn't. And that definitely detracted from the overall enjoyment a little bit. But overall, I think we both agree 1 is better than 2, but we'll also both agree, hey, play these games.
They're both good.
They're both awesome. If you've played the second one, but not the first one, go back and play the first one.
Also, I can't believe if that's someone out there. Like, I can't believe that person exists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Ugh.
It's because, like, 2 is really what they're known for. So I think a lot of people got their intro to it, and a lot of people haven't played the first one, but they really should.
I mean, I hesitate to say the first one is significantly better, but sometimes I really think it is.
Yeah, I think with the first one, too, they're just like an entire third of the game that I don't care about.
Yeah.
Which is really drags it down.
That's tough.
But still, like, they're both excellent games. If you haven't played them, please do.
Yeah, so with that, I think that's going to do it for Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. Not sure if our fans have played this game or not. We really do recommend both. They are lovely games. Thank you to Nick the Intern for leading the way on this one, and we will catch you guys next time on Goddamn Gamecube. Thanks.